Welcome to Great Automotive Lives. I'm your host, Andrew, the classic car guy. I'm a motoring writer, photographer, and now, inexplicably, in the chilly autumn of my career, a Johnny-come-lately podcaster. This podcast aims to bring to life the stories, histories, intrigue and drama surrounding some of the automotive world's most interesting characters.
Why the Life of William Lyons?
Oh, come on, Sir William Lyons, Mr. Jaguar, Blackpool boy turned very successful through sheer hard work and the force of his considerable will. Need I say more? I recommend to you The Great Automotive Life of Sir William, Mr. Jaguar, Lyons.
The Life of William Lyons.
What I know of Sir William Lyons I like and admire. His personal drive, determination and borderline workaholism provided the very bedrock from which the mighty Jaguar brand was hand-hewn. What I really admire, however, is that by his early 60s he still had a trick up his well-tailored sleeve, one which he would perform to help secure a prosperous future for his beloved company. This was the early 1960s, remember. At this time, someone in their early 60s would more likely be found with a blanket over their knees and a mug of warm Horlicks in their hand than they would pulling an all-nighter in a drafty factory to get a new car produced. Lyons had spent 40 years at the coalface of car production, however, and he was equal to the task ahead of him. And this task was not a trifling one. You could, of course, argue that Jaguar's predicament in the early 1960s was a self-inflicted wound by Lyons himself. He was, after all, an autocrat in many ways, and was careful to remain a hands-on patron of his automotive fiefdom. This favoured approach had become harder as the business had grown, and despite Jaguar being a relative minnow compared to some, Jaguar was producing around 20,000 cars a year at this time, compared to, say, Austin, who were producing 10 times this figure a full 10 years earlier. It was still a lot for one man, fast approaching retirement age, to get on top of. Whatever the reasons behind it, the prevailing situation was far from ideal. A factor that was very far from Lyons' fault, of course, was a lack of a male heir to carry the Jaguar torch blazing into the uncertain dusk of the near future. Lyons and his wife Greta had welcomed 3 children to a happy family home at Wappenbury Hall. Patricia in 1927, John in 1930, and Mary in 1937. Family tragedy would strike, however, when John was killed in 1955. He was on his way to Le Mans to support the Jaguar team when his Jaguar Mark 7 hit an American truck head-on. John died at the scene. John was working at the Jaguar factory and was being groomed as a potential successor to his father. Apart from being a loss that Lyons would never fully recover from, it must have materially exacerbated his sense of urgency to put Jaguar's affairs in order as the inevitability of his own mortality loomed large. By the early 1960s, Jaguar model lineup consisted of the E-Type, the Mark II, the S-Type, the Mark 10, and the Daimler SP250. That's a lot of distinct models for a 20,000 car a year niche producer, and Lyons knew it. The SP250, or the Daimler Dart, was inherited under the 1960 acquisition of Daimler and was for the chop anyway. But Lyons needed an all-conquering Jaguar saloon to render the disparate current models obsolete, and it needed to be a good un. A project commenced in 1963 with the internal designation XJ4, or Experimental Jaguar No. 4. Lyons would later suggest that he and his team were working to the following brief: design a saloon car that sets new standards of comfort and luxury, road holding and ride, steering and braking, performance and safety, all in one car, with a level of outstanding value that Jaguar has traditionally made their own. Sounds easy enough. A footprint roughly similar to the Jaguar Mark 10 was settled upon, and the proposed engines were to be derivatives of the iconic straight-six XK unit that had served Jaguar so well, despite first appearing back in 1948. The range topper was to be a 4.2-litre version with twin carburettors, which was soon to get a trial run in yet another Jaguar saloon, the 420. The entry-level car was to be bequeathed a new 2,792cc lump with 140 brake horsepower. Lyons' logic was that this would be a great tax break car for some European markets. As early as 1964, however, a parallel project was launched to look at the use of both V8 and V12 power in the new saloon. After all, Jaguar had a V12 engine simmering away in a gentle development cycle and, at this time, destined for use in the XJ13 Le Mans car. Strangely and terribly confusingly, the V12 project was internally designated as XJ6. Why they didn't consider the sublime 2.5-litre and 4.5-litre V8s designed by Edward Turner and inherited by dint of their Daimler acquisition seems to be an oversight of elephantine proportions. In terms of design, this is where Lyons stepped up to work his untrained and somewhat Heath Robinson brand of magic. This was very much from the school of trial and error and faffing about with clay models, sticks, and probably lots of string. It seemed to work, however, with pretty much all Jaguars to that point, except Malcolm Sayers' sublime C, D and E types. Be sure to check out episode 9 of this podcast, why don't you? Having been predominantly the work of Lyons. The development of XJ4 would result in various mock-ups arriving and departing from the fastidiously kept gravel driveway of Wappenbury Hall. Lyons was committed to the quad headlamp arrangement as already seen on the Mark 10 and the 420. The rear end was proving trickier, however, as is so often the case. Lyons had started out with a tapering derriere as per the E-Type open two-seater, but it looked all sorts of wrong. In the end, Lyons would simply truncate or chop off the tapered extremity to create the now oh-so-familiar vertical rump of the XJ Saloon. Other stylish tweaks included subtly flared wheel arches to accommodate special Dunlop ER70 VR15 tyres on 6J rims that were specially developed for the car. It was reported that Lyons had finalised the design of the car by early 1965, but the running gear, tooling and production were far from sorted. There was still much work still to do. External factors were conspiring to stymie progress too. A collapse in Mark 10 sales encouraged Jaguar to form a make-do-and-mend operation on the S-Type to create the 420 as a stopgap model. This obviously diverted stretched resources still further. Then there was a 4-week strike when 2 polishers, that's not a derogatory term on my part, but rather their job description, refused to rectify some substandard work. One of the Jaguar board, John Silver, was arrested and jailed for fraud, and XJ4 body suppliers pressed steel seemed to be playing silly buggers by repeatedly delaying deliveries. Apart from that, progress was proving entirely straightforward. By May 1966, however, there was tangible and material progress. The XJ4 prototype number 1 was finished in the form of a shiny Warwick Grey liveried 4.2-litre model with a 4-speed manual gearbox. The various diverse projects underway, Lyons' age and a lack of an heir, and perhaps even him just growing tired of the relentlessness of it all, led Mr. Jaguar to do the unthinkable. In July 1966, Jaguar merged with body manufacturer Press Steel and BMC, the British Motor Corporation, to form BMH, British Motor Holdings. Whilst the sense was that this was a reluctant move on Lyons' part, there were compensations. With BMC's resources at hand, he could realise his necessary and somewhat urgent goal to bring the XJ4 to full-scale production. Also, he would likely have no further issues with Press Steel and their ever-lengthening delivery schedules. Despite prototype number 1 arriving in May 1966, there was still a developmental marathon to run. By the middle of 1967, 1 had been joined by a 2, 3, 4 and 5. Prototype 2 was a green car with a 3-litre XK engine and a Borg & Warner Type 35 automatic transmission. And 3 was a black model hosting the same engine but with a 4-speed manual transmission. 4 had only just been built and was a 4.2-litre with a Type 8 automatic transmission, and 5 was a Mark 10 bodied development hack with over 60,000 grueling test miles behind it and now considered surplus to requirements and knackered. In 1968, more corporate shenanigans were afoot, and in January, BMH merged with the Leyland Motor Corporation to form British Leyland, a name that may make many a British car enthusiast's blood run ice cold. By July of that year, it became clear that the new saloon would have to launch without its intended 5.3-litre V12 option, and the smaller 3-litre V8 option was shelved altogether. Just the 2.8-litre and the 4.2-litre straight-six XK derivatives would open the batting, resulting in the new car being christened the XJ6. That batting was officially opened on the 26th of September 1968. The initial reaction from both the press and the public was incredibly positive. Not only was this the first brand new Jaguar model since 1961, but it looks sublime too. The thick and mouth-watering icing on this already deeply enticing cake, however, were the prices. The entry-level manual 2.8-litre model weighed in at a featherweight £1,797, whilst the range-topping 4.2-litre automatic was just £2,398. To put some context around this, a Mercedes-Benz 300 SE of the time was well over £5,000, and even the Rover P6 3500 was £1,800, and considered to occupy a rung below the Jaguars in the pecking order of prestige. At this stage, however, no one outside of the development team had driven one. Perhaps all the hubbub was premature. Maybe Lyons had lost his Midas touch and the XJ6 was all fur coat and no knickers. Maybe, but of course not. The Autocar were the first to get their hands on the new car in 1961, but my long-time personal favourite, Car Magazine, would do so soon after. Their conclusion to the test said it all really, with even a few elegant words of wisdom thrown in by the legendary LJK Setright for good measure. In 4.2-litre form, it offers at least as much performance as any of its direct competitors. It throws in supreme handling and silence, excellent braking and comfort, and all at the usual shattering Jaguar price. As the good Setright said in voting for it, it renders superfluous all cars that cost more. It still is not a perfect car, but is probably the best this nation can offer, and certainly amongst the best any nation has known for 75 years. Mr. Jaguar had pulled it out of the bag just when it mattered, and for one last time. It was a masterstroke that would give rise to an automotive masterpiece. The XJ6, of course, suffered a few slings and arrows. The 2.8-litre engine turned out to be a bit of a lemon, for example, but it would prove to be the keystone of a range of closely related saloons that would take Jaguar right through until 2009. Lyons would continue to head up his revered company for a couple more years and enjoy the worldwide success of his XJ6 before officially retiring in 1972. With his sharp suits, rambling manor house and ennoblement of the later years, it's easy to forget that William Lyons was a native of Blackpool in Lancashire. William Lyons was born into modest circumstances, but certainly not abject poverty. His father, also really confusingly William, was an Irish immigrant who owned and ran a music shop in Blackpool. His mother, Minnie, was the daughter of a mill owner who, seemingly, had married somewhat beneath herself. William Jr., shall we call him, was born on the 14th of September 1901, making it really easy to work out how old he was in any year of the subsequent 83 of his life. Young William would occasionally help out in his father's shop and would even retain an interest in fixing, or trying to fix, pianos late into his life. His true interest, however, lay elsewhere. On leaving school, Lyons would take up an engineering apprenticeship at Crossley Motors in Manchester, and by 1919 he was working at Brown and Mallier in Blackpool, the town's sunbeam dealer. Probably no coincidence, then, that Lyons was known to have owned an oil bath motorcycle at around this time. His dream machines at this stage were Harley-Davidsons and Bruff Superiors, but these remained out of reach for now. Emphasising the importance of Blackpool in the Jaguar story, Lyons lived across the street from one William Walmsley. Lyons and Walmsley bonded over their mutual love of motorcycles, despite Walmsley being 10 years Lyons' senior. It transpired that Walmsley was building stylish octagonal motorcycle sidecars under the name Swallow. Lyons was so taken with them that he bought one to go in combination with the Norton that he was now riding. Through his own experiences with the Swallow, Lyons became convinced that others would love it as much as he did, and despite his tender age, could see untapped potential for Walmsley's business. In other parts of Lyons' life, monumental and long-lasting developments were unfolding too. Shortly before his 20th birthday, Lyons met Greta Brown at a mutual friend's party in Blackpool. From this point onwards, Lyons and Greta would spend the next 63 years together. By 1922, Lyons and Walmsley formed a partnership with some money put up by their respective fathers and a £500 bank loan. The Swallow Sidecar Company was born. Young Lyons was alive with ideas, and soon the business had moved to larger premises to allow for expansion. By 1924 the business was doing well enough for Lyons to be encouraged to propose to young Greta. They were married on the 15th of September 1924 at St. Stephen-on-the-Cliffs Church in Blackpool. They spent their honeymoon, just like me and Mrs. Classic Car Guy, on a motor tour in Scotland, and on their return they set up home in Bispam Road, Blackpool. The uber-stylish Swallow sidecars continued to do very well and looked particularly good when paired with Lyons' favourite, the Bruff Superior. This continued success necessitated a move to bigger premises, and luckily Walmsley's father was able to buy a substantial building in Cocker Street, Blackpool. With extra space now at their disposal, Walmsley and Lyons were soon able to offer repair and paint services for cars, as well as the ability to fit hoods and upholstery. This diversification prompted the partnership to adjust the company name to Swallow Sidecar and Coach Building. This flex possibly encouraged the Blackpool boys to more tangibly get involved with car manufacture. An Austin 7 chassis was acquired through a friend of a friend of a friend. Lyons sketched the car he aspired to build and went on to commission one Cyril Holland, a coach builder of local renown, to build it for him. Holland would become a long-term collaborator with Lyons and would go on to develop an uncanny ability to interpret his boss's sketches and confusing notations into wood and metal to impressive effect. Holland's interpretation of Lyons's design gifted it a detachable hardtop with a distinctive rear window. The result was announced to the public in May 1927 as the Austin 7 Swallow. Lyons took the diminutive car to London to show it to leading car dealers Henley's. Bert Henley was impressed by the two-seater car and the upcoming saloon version. Lyons headed back to Blackpool with an order for 500 cars in his skyrocket. The company's car manufacturing future seemed assured. So much so that the word sidecar was dropped from the company name in 1927. With this ratcheting up of success came tough decisions to be made. The bigger the company grew, the harder they found it to find skilled and suitable staff. What's more, the bulk of their componentry was coming from Britain's motor city, Coventry, and the supply chain was longer than was ideal. In 1928, Lyons and Walmsley moved their business to a disused World War I munitions factory in Holbrook Lane, Coventry. The Swallow range would continue to grow in 1929, with charming bodies fitted to standard Swift and even Fiat chassis. By 1931, a Swallow based on the Wolseley Hornet was in production, marking the arrival of a six-cylinder car to the range. Things were going pretty well, but Lyons was frustrated. The constraints imposed by utilising the rolling chassis of other manufacturers did not sit well with the free-thinking Lyons. In 1931, Lyons had a chassis built to his own specification by Rubery Owen and paired it with the proven standard 16 engine. Lyons penned a very sleek sports car design with an incredibly low roofline. It was very low indeed. So low, in fact, that when Lyons went to hospital for an operation during the prototyping process, he would return to find the roofline had been significantly raised. It seemed Walmsley and the team had worried that drivers above around 5'4" would not be allowed the luxury of sitting up straight. For his part, Lyons would later describe the revision as akin to a submarine's conning tower. The new car would be revealed to an eager public in 1931 and denominated as the SS1. Lyons' approach to car manufacturers already well defined at this early stage. In prophetic words that would define this man's cars into the future, Motor Magazine would report, "The SS1 is a new type of automobile, in the sense that it is a car built for the connoisseur, but is relatively low-priced. All the attributes of sports models are incorporated in a refined manner, and this, coupled with a striking experience, is bound to attract enthusiastic motorists of modest means." An SS2 would soon follow, but Lyons was forever pushing for more, better, faster, putting pressure on himself and the business to excel and progress. Walmsley, not so much. He had become more focused on his hobbies, which included model railways, general tinkering, and faffing about. It sounds idyllic. Walmsley would leave the business in 1935, and Lyons would take the firm, now called SS Cars, public. Lyons was an unorthodox designer of sorts, but not any sort of engineer. He knew his limitations, however, and set about building a world-class team around him. He already had Cyril Holland, of course, but soon William Haynes and Harry Westlake would join the team. Haynes would head up the engineering department, and Westlake would be put to work creating the first true Jaguar engine for the upcoming new model. The new model would appear in 1936 in the svelte shape of the SS Jaguar 100. Westlake's engine was a heavily modified version of the 2.5-litre standard unit with overhead valves and a new cylinder head. Twin SU carburetors were fitted, ramping up power from 70 horsepower to over 100. In 1938, a 3.5-litre version was released, offering up 125 brake horsepower and delivering Lyons his long-desired 100-mile-an-hour sports car in the process. At around this time, Lyons would purchase Wappenbury Hall as a fitting family home for an aspiring captain of industry. Wappenbury Hall stands around half an hour from the Holbrook Lane factory. Built in the late 1890s, Wappenbury Hall was a 9-bedroom pile with 6 reception rooms and sat in around 36 acres of formal gardens. A further 290 acres of rolling Warwickshire farmland were included in the purchase. Wappenbury Hall would not only remain the Lyons family home for the remainder of William and Greta's lives, but also go on to co-star in many a later Jaguar publicity shoot, with the gravel drive and neatly pruned foliage providing the perfect backdrop for Jaguars of all stripes. Even the bucolic environs of rural Warwickshire were not adequate refuge from the gathering global storm clouds, however. The Lyons family had hardly settled into their new home when the advent of the Second World War turned this well-ordered rural idyll on its head. During the war years, Lyons and his company were pressed into supporting the war effort like so many others. The Holbrook Lane factory became a key manufacturer of technical parts that would find their way onto many an iconic wartime aircraft, including Lancasters, Mosquitoes, and even Spitfires. They also provided motorcycle sidecars, a craft Lyons of course knew well, and even an innovative and multi-purpose 10-hundredweight trailer to be used with jeeps and light trucks. During this period, over 30,000 trailers were produced, together with 10,000 sidecars. Lyons still had one beady eye on the post-war period, of course. To this end, he would ensure his key players such as Haynes, Westlake and Holland, who sound for all the world like an experimental prog rock trio, would often find themselves on fire watch together. They would be joined by Walter Hassan and Claude Bailey most often. Here the talk was invariably of a more powerful engine and rapid sports cars yet to come. The first big news in the immediate aftermath of World War II was yet another name change. This time, however, it was deemed an absolute necessity. On the 23rd of March 1945, a general meeting of the SS Cars shareholders agreed to change the company name to Jaguar Cars Limited. Lyons said at the time, "Unlike SS, the name Jaguar is distinctive and cannot be connected or confused with any similar foreign name." Enough said, Bill. Post-war production would kick off with 1.5, 2.5 and 3.5 Mark IV cars, with a Mark V following quickly along. In 1948, however, something seismic happened, an event that would truly cement Jaguar's future at the heart of the worldwide motor industry and ensure Lyons' legacy would prevail in perpetuity. All those long nights on firewatch duty during the war were about to pay dividends as Lyons now focused his crack team on creating a new engine. His brief was clear. He needed something of a higher than normal output that would be able to stay ahead of the competition without revision for many years. Oh, and it needed to look good. Following a veritable blizzard of testing activity, trial and error, a straight 6 unit of 3.4 litre displacement was settled upon and given the name XK6. This engine was a masterstroke and full testament to the team Lyons had drawn around him. Further validation would eventually come when the XK engine went on to become a mainstay of Jaguar's preeminence, and it would remain in service in one form or another until the mid-1980s. In line with Lyons' brief, the XK engine looked good, very good, but not as good as the car he designed to clothe it in. The Jaguar XK120 would debut at the 1948 London Motor Show to a rapturous reception. Lyons had initially only intended the XK120 to be a low-volume special, primarily to serve as a testbed for the XK engine, whilst generating a bit of healthy publicity along the way. As such, the early XK120s were ash-framed with curvaceous aluminium panels hand-fitted upon them. This was clearly unsuited to volume production, but the demand for the car, not least as generated by the notorious Max Hoffman in the USA, please refer yourself immediately to podcast episode 8 for full deets, was too monumental for Lyons to resist. In short order, the XK120 morphed into an all-steel affair and production ratcheted into full swing. Lyons' marketing nous was also in full swing with the release of the XK120. The 120, of course, referred to the car's top speed, and it was recognised as the world's fastest production car of its day. The first production model was delivered to none other than screen idol Clark Gable whilst he was filming Never Let Me Go in Cornwall. To help cement the XK120's reputation as the world's fastest production car, Lyons would arrange a high-profile demonstration in May 1949. This would involve a Jaguar XK120 piloted by test driver Ron Soapy Sutton, don't ask, streaking along a closed section of high-speed autoroute between Jabec and Altair in Belgium. With just a handful of makeshift modifications wrought, the car was officially recorded travelling at a two-way average of 132.3 596 miles an hour, roughly. The XK120 was truly a watershed car for the incredibly young Jaguar cars operation and would fully deserve the title of an automotive icon, with exploits on the racetracks of the world boosting sales success on the forecourts of the world. By 1950, the XK120 was racing at Le Mans, as well as excelling in various rally competitions, launching Jaguar into the white-hot cauldron of competitive motorsport. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, all this success was severely testing both space and resources. To this end, in 1950, Lyons struck a deal with the Ministry of Supply for a 5-year lease on an old shadow factory at Browns Lane in Coventry. This had been operated and overseen by Daimler during the war and had been instrumental in producing radial aero engines for Bristol bombers, as well as producing ferret light armoured cars. In 1959, the now ennobled Sir William Lyons bought Browns Lane outright for £1.25 million, which he would describe as amongst his most satisfying achievements. Browns Lane would remain the sole production hub for Jaguar cars between 1952 and 1998, and will forever remain the spiritual home of the marque. Of course, very many world-beating cars would roll through the Browns Lane gates during this time, not least Malcolm Sayers.
Sayer is the subject of this podcast's inaugural in-brief episode, so please have a listen.
Sublime C, D and E types. In many ways, however, it seems appropriate somehow to bookend Lyons' remarkable automotive life with the XK120 and the XJ6 with which we opened. Very different cars, of course, released 20 years apart, but both exhibiting the Lyons DNA writ mighty large. But what of the man himself? From what I've learned of him, I think I would have liked him very much. In terms of leadership style, he was definitely an autocrat, but was widely considered as a fair one by those in his employ. He was undoubtedly either endearingly or annoyingly hands-on, depending on your standpoint, right through his tenure at Jaguar. Stories abound of Lyons routinely touring the Browns Lane plant at night, stopping in on each department to check on progress, his last always being the experimental studio. His visits here often entailed the Jaguar chairman placing his tailored jacket on the back of a chair and getting his hands dirty, sometimes well into the night. Even after retirement, Sir William made it a habit suddenly to ask for a car straight from the assembly line to drive him home, just to make sure the standards were kept up. He would later smile and say, "Occasionally I've been disappointed, but it's only ever been on details. I'll still call for a car now and then to keep a watchful eye on things." He could delegate, however, when he recognised great talent and insight. Malcolm Sayer was granted a great deal of autonomy, for example, on the cars for which he would later become so directly associated with, the C, D and E type. What was in no doubt, however, was Lyons' ability to spot that talent and build a world-beating team around him. He can't have been that difficult to work for after all, as many of these rising stars stayed with him for many years and remained fiercely loyal. Bill Haynes would work for him for over 35 years, and Lofty England, he was 6'5", joined Jaguar in 1946 as an apprentice and would eventually succeed Lyons as Jaguar chief executive and chairman in 1972. Despite attaining great wealth and prominence, Lyons was never ostentatious or overbearing. In fact, he was described as being rather shy, a somewhat diffident character, a man whose few chosen words were usually very well considered. Despite this reticence, Lyons had a significant presence and aura about him. He was tall and slim, straight-backed, and always immaculately dressed in his signature dark blue suit with white shirt and sober tie. His entrance into any room was likely to draw the attention, as he likely drew a hand across his slick-back silver-grey hair or subtly adjusted his black-rimmed spectacles. One endearing constant in his life was his family. His marriage to Greta was widely thought to be a blissfully happy one for both of them. Greta would always be Lyons' greatest of supporters and cheerleaders. Being quite obviously an incurable workaholic, Lyons would quite often wonder aloud about Greta's loyalty and steadfastness. He would say of her, "I think at times she must have been a very lonely woman. I worked such long hours, sometimes all weekends, and we frequently went without holidays. But she understood. I don't think I always appreciated just how much, although I've always realized she had exceptional qualities as a woman." Oh, how sweet. Lyons doted on his children too. He and Greta would welcome 3 children to Wappenbury: Patricia, John and Mary. Lyons would report of Greta that she once said to me that she sometimes wondered if I remembered if I had children. I saw them all the time and always knew what they were up to, but I rarely had time to take them out and play with them. I don't think it has made any difference. We're a very happy and close family. Indeed, I think it's important if you're going to succeed. Top bloke, this one. I'm pretty sure none of his children felt neglected or unloved, however. Pat would go on to marry Ian Appleyard, and in the early 1950s she would join him in over 20 international rallies as a co-driver cum navigator. They achieved considerable success in the Monte Carlo, Alpine Trial, RAC and Tulip rallies, the most well-known being a Gold Cup in the Coupe d'Alpe awarded for 3 unpenalised Alpine Trials in a row, 1951, 52 and 53, with their famous work-supported early XK120 NUB120, which you can go and see for yourself at one of my favourite places, the British Motor Museum at Gaydon. Middle child John was destined to rise up the Jaguar empire and ultimately succeed his father. He was already employed by the Coventry family firm when he met his impossibly tragic demise in 1955. As we have already heard, John was travelling to Le Mans to join the Jaguar team who were racing there. Despite this awful accident, Lyons insisted, against the pleading of those around him, that the team continued to race. Understandably, he was deeply affected by his monumental loss for the remainder of his life. Youngest daughter Mary later married Guy Rimmel, the son of a famous horse trainer, and taking his surname. I understand that the marriage was later dissolved, and at this point the Mary Rimmel, née Lyons, trail goes stone cold. If you know any more in this respect, please drop me a line. Given Lyons' peerless work ethic, retirement must have been hard for him. Once Lofty England took the reins from Lyons in 1972, Bill and Greta took a long holiday in Portugal. On his return to Wappenbury, Lyons busied himself husbanding his famous prize-winning Suffolk sheep and Jersey cattle on his extensive farm estates surrounding Wappenbury Hall. His health started to deteriorate in retirement, which is so often the case with high achievers. He would remain a staunch champion for his remarkable business and a trusted sounding board for later management right up to the end, however. Sir William Lyons died in his sleep at his beloved Wappenbury Hall on the 8th of February 1985 at the age of 83. His beloved wife Greta would outlive him by less than a year. Around 400 metres south of Wappenbury Hall stands the ancient medieval church of St. John the Baptist, Wappenbury. It is in the graveyard of this ancient rural church that William and his beloved Greta are both laid to rest.
The life of William Lyons in summary.
What a guy. I liked Bill, didn't you? He was a workaholic autocrat, it seems. But he wasn't an objectionable one in any way, given the loyalty, long-working and productive relationships he fostered amongst his team. He worked too hard, but seemed to hold a deep love for his wife Greta and his 3 children, Pat, John and Mary. What I always wonder at with great automotive lives like this one is that before William Lyons there was no Jaguar cars, and after William Lyons there will always be Jaguar cars in some shape or form. As a relentless underachiever, this sort of legacy building remains something I find hard to adequately process. Jaguar was a young company by many comparisons, and quite a small one. Back in Sir William's day, 20,000 cars produced in 1 year represented a good result. Many of the companies that would ultimately join Jaguar in the automotive bin fire that was British Leyland were hitting those numbers each month without breaking a sweat. Within this context, surely William Lyons' legacy is all the more remarkable, with Jaguar being one of those few car brands that even the most Luddite of non-car person would likely recognise. Despite no real training as a marketer or designer, Bill Lyons seemed to inherently grasp what Jaguar was about as a concept, an idea, a feeling. In his own haphazard way, he could pull remarkable cars out of the bag again and again and again. For the stuff he couldn't do, he was an acknowledged master at talent spotting, hiring, retaining and motivating some of the very best brains in the business. This was his secret to Jaguar punching above its size and weight each and every time. The succession of truly inspired cars that would roll out of Brown's Lane would be the equal, if not the better, of any equivalent marque you care to think of. What about the dodgy reputation for build quality, reliability and durability, the naysayers might ask? Well, this reputation can entirely be laid at the feet of the marque's sad decline during the British Leyland days and perhaps beyond. Whilst Bill Lyons was at the reins, he would have spotted this sort of malaise a mile off and suffocated it at birth. Now I'm fairly convinced that one man is predominantly responsible for the esteem and affection that continues to be shown to his marque today, and that's Bill Lyons. Well done, sir.
In the footsteps of William Lyons.
So what physical remnants of this great automotive life remain in the earthly realm as of today? Let's start in Wappenbury, shall we? The village of Wappenbury sits in a nice tract of rural England, roughly equidistant from Coventry, Leamington Spa and Rugby. It's a small place, and pleasingly, Wappenbury Hall still stands as the most expensive and regal home hereabouts. Today the hall is a private residence and so not open to the Jaguar-centric public, or probably any other type of public. A stone's throw from the hall, however, is the church of St. John the Baptist. In the graveyard surrounding the church you will find modest memorials to both William and Greta. If you make it to Wappenbury, it would seem churlish not to seize the opportunity to head due south for about 13 miles to visit the British Motor Museum at Gaydon. Gaydon is today also the home of the superb Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust. The trust occupies a recent-looking annex to the side of the main museum and is awash, literally awash, with fascinating Jaguars, Daimlers and SS cars, as well as a wealth of information and ephemera about the great man himself. I really cannot recommend this great museum to you highly enough, and they're not even paying me. A trip into Coventry itself will facilitate a visit to Coventry Transport Museum in the centre of the city. This is another mecca for students of Mr. Jaguar, with many fascinating Jaguar and Lyons exhibits, thanks to the company's intimate links to this great city. If you're at the museum, a 5-mile trip southwards towards the university campus will bring you to Gibbet Hill Road. If you seek out an attractive 1920s house called Hillside at number 4, you will have found the Lyons family home before they moved to Wappenbury Hall. This one's not too shabby either. The house was sold in 2021 for around £950,000. If you head to the north of the city to find Brown's Lane, you will find the road, but not the factory. The last car of 1,447,677 built at the factory rolled out of the gates in July 2005. It was an XJ saloon with the registration number of XJ05 JAG and was handed to the Daimler Jaguar Heritage Trust, and it can still be seen today at the British Motor Museum in Gaydon. The Browns Lane site was redeveloped as housing thereafter, and that's what you will see today. In a nice nod to the site's heritage, you will be able to drive down Lyons Drive into Walmsley Close before pulling a big old U-E and hanging a packet of draft into Haynes Walk. There's even a Sayer Drive to cruise along should you so wish. What better place to stop for a few shots with the old E-Type? One has to ask oneself. As part of the exemplary service offered to Great Automotive Lives listeners, you'll find a few helpful links to some of these Lyons-related landmarks in the accompanying show notes. Happy motoring, dear friends. I truly hope you found today's Great Automotive Life interesting, inspiring, or at the very least a useful jumping off point for your own onward journey of discovery. Much like an underinvested and dysfunctional mass transportation system, I'm reasonably likely to amble along again at some undefined point in the near, medium or far future to invite you to join me on another automotive tangent of discovery. Inevitably, and for the sake of brevity, the fascinating details of this great automotive life have been significantly distilled, and so preemptive apologies are offered for glaring omissions, which there are probably many. Your input and feedback is welcome, of course, on the understanding that I'm pathetically thin-skinned, so go easy with me. The contact email address is trepidatiously provided in the accompanying show notes. Until then, please tell many others if you enjoyed this podcast, and even perhaps leave the 21st century's equivalent of a thumbs up at the Colosseum in the form of a warm and fluffy review. It not only helps me avoid becoming moodier and more irascible, but also helps others find the podcast and generally makes the world a tiny bit nicer for a vanishingly small number of people. If you hated it, tell no one. Until next time, dear listener,